What's going on, everyone? It's the My Aggie Nation Podcast. I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle, here with Alex Miller. What's up, Alex?
Not a lot, Travis. Writing about a woman riding on top of a freight train, just your standard Wednesday afternoon.
Always a blasty blast. And WTAW Zach Taylor. You ridden any on top of any freight trains lately?
No, but I have Teen Wolf rode on top of a car one time. No, I'm just playing.
You could say I tracked down that story.
Oh, look at you with the puns. He's been holding on to that one for a while. All day he's been waiting.
Oh, no. We're starting the podcast off with that. Okay, well,
it can only go uphill from here.
It really can only go up from here. We'll go ahead and get into the sports aspects of the podcast, and that is the A&M football team. Man, fan base is in a meltdown. First time losing to Arkansas in 10 years. I mean, is the sky falling, Zach Taylor?
If you pay attention to some, I don't know, internet boards or Facebook posts or things like that, social media, you might think that way. I mean, golly, I honestly, and I truly do believe this. I think Arkansas, besides Ole Miss and Alabama, will be the toughest team that A&M faces on their schedule. And they faced them without two of their starting offensive linemen. They faced them with a backup quarterback. Now, what the defense did, makes you worry if you're an Aggie fan, at least in that first half. Now, they did correct everything, and Mike Oko really had them rolling in that second half. But that first half, I mean, when KJ Jefferson's able to get Boykins, who everybody knew he was going to be the threat, right? And find him on a big bomb, and then A.J. Green, and you have that forearm shiver try from, we're still trying to figure out what that was from Aaron Hansford. But Arkansas's a pretty good team. And yes, A&M was ranked highly coming into this year, but everyone knew that the offensive line was going to be a question mark. And I think you can see that it's drastically a step down than what it was last year. You don't just up and replace 4 senior starting offensive linemen who all went to the league. So, no, the sky is not falling. A&M has to do a regroup here. Now, you go out and you come up empty against Mississippi State and you lose to Mississippi State at home, then you're going to see some folks, I think, start panicking a little bit. But no, as of right now, Arkansas is a pretty dang good team. You caught them at the wrong time for you, health-wise and just experience-wise. So,
was the defense really that good in the second half, or was it that Arkansas had a backup quarterback in that really couldn't pass the ball?
So everybody sensed that, but who knocked KJ Jefferson out? And I'm not saying that the Aggie defense specifically went out there trying to take him out, but there's a reason why he stopped playing. It was because the Aggie defense knocked him down. And it was a clean push. It wasn't pushed out of bounds. And even before that, though, they really weren't moving the ball well, at least in that one drive that he was in. And of course he came back and they had a little bit of action going on. They did make it down to the goal line, had to settle for a field goal. But I will say this. I believe that Mike Elko is one of the best defensive coordinators at making halftime adjustments. Very rarely, I'm trying to recall if you've ever seen the Aggies play worse on defense in the second half than they did in the first half. Now, that's not to say they didn't get lit up by some teams. Alabama, obviously, some other squads, but overall, they generally play better in the second half than they do in the first. And, they had a little bit of bend, don't break, but they only gave up 3 points in the second half. Yeah, you can say, well, KJ Jefferson's out. Well, who caused him to go out? It was the Aggie defense. So, you could say the same thing about Arkansas's defense. A&M had its backup quarterback in that didn't have one start under his belt. So, I think the defense is going to be fine. Maybe it's not elite. I think a lot of people maybe thought that at the beginning of the year. I don't think it's an elite defense, but I think it's pretty dang good.
Is there a Dave Campbell's Texas football curse, Alex?
Yeah, I don't know. But I definitely think the mood around A&M fans is. Have either of you ever seen Mean Girls 2?
Wait, there's
a second one.
There is a second one.
I had no idea.
Second one.
Is
and
Lindsay,
And in the
Is the
movie,
lens in it?
no, I don't think so.
Why would
But
I
in
see
the
it if Lindsay Lohan's not in it? Come on.
in the movie, the girl who is the protagonist, she walks into class the first day of school, or at her first day there, and the teacher is a man with his head down on the desk, and she's asking why is he so upset. Well, as you can tell in the movie, his desk is decorated with A&M gear, and he is so devastated that the Aggies had lost to Arkansas that weekend, and it was still Monday, and it was Monday. So I
That
definitely
movie has a 4.1 out of 10 on the IMDb rating. Oh,
Who
golly.
was it like made for DVD? How have I never heard of this?
I don't know, but it clearly wasn't that good, or else you probably would have. But
JoJo.
Wait,
JoJo
okay, hold
was
on,
in
time
it.
out. Let's back. We need to just segue off on this a second. How did you see it?
how did I see it?
Yeah.
That's a great question that I don't think I have an answer to, but I remember seeing it and watching the movie and going, wow.
Was it in theaters? Was it on?
I
Were you
think
channel
so.
surfing? What I need to know.
No, I'm pretty sure it was in theaters. But either way,
It came out in 2011. So how old were you, Alex?
13.
Okay, so mom had to drive him to the theater if that was the case. So or mom or dad. So we'll just
Yeah.
blame a parent somewhere in there.
Either way, that seems to be the feeling of A&M fans on at least on Monday. Was they had lost to Arkansas. Zach kind of laid it out. You hadn't lost to him in a decade. You're missing 2 offensive linemen, backup quarterback can't really put it together. That was definitely just kind of the feeling that the A&M circles had this week.
Well, now this is our new task: how to fit Mean Girls 2 into the title of this podcast, because that's just become the thing. So a lot of talk about the offensive line, a lot of talk about Zach Calzada's play. Both were very substandard by any stretch of the imagination. I know it's a little bit of a chicken or an egg argument, but was Zach Calzada's bad play because of bad offensive line play? Or were the two mutually exclusive? Or was Zach Calzada bad and it made the offensive line even worse?
You want to take it, Alex, first?
Yeah, here's my thing: is A&M was down two starters on the offensive line, so that clearly didn't help. But I thought in the second half, Zach Calzada had adequate time to make passes. He had 5, 6, 7 seconds. Arkansas did a phenomenal job in coverage with that 3-5-3, however you want to describe it. They played dime the whole time. They had 6 DBs, only rushed 3. 55 in the middle, I can't remember his name. He was the defensive lineman of the week. He did phenomenal rushing up the middle. Williams, yeah. But Calzada clearly didn't have the decision-making needed to lead the offense down the field facing that kind of defense. He had chances. They had receivers that he had a Devon Chain on a little dump route wide open. He missed it. I know people have been talking about that, but I think it was a mix of both. I think they're mutually exclusive, but I think in the second half, Calzada had time where maybe he hadn't before, wasn't able to nail down a decision, complete the passes when needed, and at times had chances to run and opted not to, in throwing incompletions instead. I think I only saw him run a couple of times, and on one of those, he got 10, 12 yards and got a first down.
Mm-hmm. Which I think was called back for a holding penalty.
Yeah,
probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, had some bad penalties up front as well. I agree with Alex. I think in the second half, the O-line looked a lot better. I really do. I'm not saying that they look great. You still had some bad plays. I think Kenyon Green had an atrocious hold and still ended up giving up the sack late. But at the end of the day, the O-line had improved a little bit in that second half, and Calzada did have time to make some plays. I think that once the countdown happens in his mind, once that clock strikes 0 or midnight or whatever, he panics a little bit. And he doesn't really know exactly where he needs to go with the ball. He'll roll out and then he'll try and force it. A lot of times he's throwing it into the ground. The accuracy's a little off. The touch is a little off. So I don't believe the two are mutually exclusive. I think they definitely can play off of each other. I think with if you have a perfect offensive line and Zach Calzada has all day to throw, he'll be much, much better. But there were some obvious decisions and have been since he's come on that you sit there and go, that's nobody's fault but Zach's. I mean, he's got some wide receivers open at times. It seemed like every single time. And again, Arkansas was showing them with that 3-5-3 that kind of more was conducive, I think, to the check down, to the dump off to the running back. But I mean, he had a ton of those. And going back to kind of what Alex said, there are moments where you see, hey, he's got this guy open. He just doesn't see him. And that's going to happen to every quarterback, but you try to limit that as much as possible. That's what separates the good ones from the not so good ones or the moderate ones. And so his field vision definitely, if the Aggies want to have even a chance against Alabama, has to be better. My whole question in this, and I think a lot of other people's too, and even Brent Zorneman asked Jimbo about it.
Brent Zorneman
on Monday had asked him, hey, after you guys got the touchdown run, you ran the ball once after that. I mean, you handed the ball off to a back one time after you got a 67-yard touchdown run. There's obviously some holes that are starting to open up. At least it looks like that. Why not give the ball to your backs? Because that's the best part of this offense. And I asked Jimbo about it. He said, hey, the best performing part, best position group of this offense has been the backs. Make the other team beat you where you're good. Make them beat you with your running backs. Your obviously quarterback is not a strength for Texas A&M right now. So why either win or lose on the arm of Zach Calzada when you got two world beaters at running back? And I get it that they're not going to have as many holes as they previously have had. And you can't run it just exclusively because everybody's going to play the run and you're not going to get anywhere. But, and I know that Jimbo had come out and said, well, the way that everything's set up, both the possession time, the RPOs, everything that they were showing, there was not an opportunity for that. That chance didn't open, that we were going to be able to run it. The penalties negated that, and now we're stuck in second and long, third and long. We've got to throw the ball. But, man, you do sit there and go, hey, this is the best part of your offense right now. You got to get these guys the ball.
Is it the best part of the offense, though? Because if you take out the one
what
Isaiah
else is the best part of the offense?
Well, I mean, but here's what that's kind of the point. If you take out the Isaiah Spiller touchdown run, they averaged like 2.9 yards per rush on 30 something runs. And I mean, yes, Isaiah Spiller and Devon Achane are the two best weapons they have out there. But if you'd have an offensive line that isn't creating any holes, they created one really good one pretty much the whole game. Is it something you can rely on? And also, I mean, is an RPO not necessarily a run call? It's just up to the quarterback to make that decision on the reads that the defense is giving him. I mean, it is a frustrating conundrum for that defense or for that offense, because you think if you have a team that's rushing 3 and dropping 6, there's going to be running room and you're going to be able to open up holes for them to run and force them to drop another linebacker in or drop another defensive tackle in, but they weren't doing that. And so it's kind of darned if you do, darned if you don't there. Trust me, I get it. Isaiah Spiller needs to have the ball more in clutch times, but if you don't have a run blocking offensive line that can open up any space for him, or wide receivers who are making good blocks, because there was several times that guys ran, especially on screens, guys, which you could effectively throw in screens into the run game. They weren't holding their blocks and they were getting blown up in the backfield. I mean, I don't know what necessarily, kind of playing devil's advocate, I don't know what the option is there.
Frustrated is the word that I think I used to describe how it seems A&M feels about its offense. I mean, Anais Smith kind of touched on that on Monday. And Travis, to your point on the screens, we saw that play out in the game with Anais, where they tried to run a screen to the wide side of the field. It looked like he was mixed up on the play. A couple guys missed some blocks, and it was like a 5-6 yard loss. Right after that, Jimbo coming onto the field, and they're just yelling at each other, like, what's going on? You can see the frustration mounting and spewing out onto the field. for the Aggie offense.
So along the same lines of what Zach's talking about here, as A&M heads into the Mississippi State game, where they're going to throw the ball around a lot, they're going to try to move fast, and they're going to try to put points on the board. This is a game where Jimbo Fisher is going to want to utilize that possession type offense that he likes, keep Mississippi State's offense off the field, because I don't necessarily think that they could hold together in a shootout. It needs to be a low scoring, low possession game, but do they have the offensive line and the run offense right now to be able to maintain that possession and an offense that doesn't commit penalties, that puts them behind the chains that makes them have to throw and reduces time of possession as well?
Well, I think with the penalties, especially there on the offensive line, and I'm not saying that some of the veteran guys didn't rack up some of those, they did, but I think whenever you're working with a full, healthy O-line, with all the guys, you've got Layden Robinson back, Jameer Johnson's able to play the entire game, and I know that's a lot of what ifs, but if they do, I think that you'll see a much more cohesive unit. Not a great unit, maybe not even a good unit, but it will be more cohesive, and I think you'll kind of work down on some of those penalties. And you got to give Arkansas a lot of credit too. I think that, the Razorback defense probably induced some of that. But I absolutely agree. And Jimbo's offense, even with Kellen Mond, was never built around the pass, and it was never built about going down and scoring quickly. It's all about kind of the anaconda effect, so to speak, that you can strict the other team and you slowly but surely start to suck the life out of them, and that you just rack up 3-4 yards a play, work your way down on these 10-play drives, finish it off with a touchdown, and oh, by the way, you chewed up 10 minutes. I know that would be the ultimate. What they would love to do is keep the other team's offense completely off the field. To do that, you got to be able to run the ball.
So what you're trying to say is the Anaconda don't want none unless you've got runs, hun?
Yeah. And then you can talk about runs. They can get into something else too. I'll have to use that for the next Pepto-Bismol commercial. But all that being said, yeah, that's the way Jimbo likes to operate. He always has. And in order to do that, you have to be able to establish the run. If A&M can establish the run against Mississippi State, then I think they have a really, really, really good shot. Because again, you give the ball to Spiller, you give it to Chain, you more or less take the ball out of Calzada's hands in these big moments, and you allow your running backs to really get the win. And you had brought it up too, these RPO calls, but then you also are placing a lot of trust on your quarterback in making the right reads and the right calls. So what if there are instances where it's an RPO and Calzada opts to not hand it off and he wants to throw it, and you end up with a busted play, an incompletion, a pass for a loss? I mean, a lot of that can be kind of circled back to the quarterback too. Granted, the coach is giving him that freedom to run that. I just don't know if Calzada is necessarily up to that task yet.
Well, but I mean, and I haven't gone back play by play to see, so I'm leaning a little bit on Jimbo and not necessarily knowing if he's throwing spin out there, but he did say that a lot of those RPO calls were passes that led to gained yardage, most notably the one to Anais Smith down the sideline for 30 yards was off of an RPO play that he pulled and decided to pass. So, I mean, Fisher didn't necessarily seem to indicate that he was making the wrong reads there. But that's also taking him at his word on that and not necessarily even gone back to look at it. So real quick, to look at the defense, Mississippi State is, again, like we said, it's Mike Leach. He's going to throw the ball around. Most of the teams they face, Memphis, LSU, a lot of these teams have done exactly what Arkansas did and taken away from their pass rush, drop 6, and let them have the intermediate and underneath passes. I think Damani Richardson was the one this week who said that that's probably what they're going to do, considering they did their variation of that, which is instead of taking a defensive lineman, they take a linebacker off the field and drop another safety back into coverage and only have one linebacker. So it's a 4-1-6 formation. You would expect that. Do you expect it to be one of those games where between the 20s, both teams are probably going to have some decent success moving the ball? There's going to be a lot of yardage gained and first downs picked up there, but the game is going to be won on who can defend the red zone and or hold the field goals.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. I'm curious to see how A&M will play Antonio Johnson because the way we saw it last week in the first half, A&M allowed its corners to guard Traylon Burks, who is easily Arkansas's best receiver. But if you paid attention in the second half, Antonio Johnson was covering Burks man to man, and really shut him down. Burks ended up leaving due to a slight injury, but he only had 2 targets and only had 1 catch, and Tyreek Chappelle was the one who was guarding him on that play. So effectively, Johnson helped shut down Arkansas's biggest playmaker of the day. I'm really curious to see with A&M going against a pass-heavy team, Antonio Johnson being one of probably A&M's best cover defenders so far this season. Do they kind of replicate that and say, hey, your job is to cover Mississippi State's top receiver? How does that shake out? Because we saw last week, Miles Jones, he didn't quite have step for step with Traylon Burks on that long touchdown run. Tyreek Chappelle, I think, has gotten better, but he's still a freshman, and you need Jalen Jones on the other side, holding down the outside as well. So that's what I'm curious about is how do they use Antonio Johnson against this pass heavy offense?
So let's wrap this up with a little bit of prediction time. I'll go ahead and throw mine out there. I think it's going to be low scoring. I think A&M will be able to, the offensive line will be able to get some push on this Mississippi State defensive line. I think it'll be somewhat low scoring, a couple field goals kicked. Give me 27-17 Aggies.
Okay. All right. Well, at this point, I don't even know what the line is right now. That
9.5, I think.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think Mississippi State is going to be able to cover that. I'm going to say 24-21. I think it's going to come down to field goals. So I'm going to say 24-21 Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think it's going to look a lot similar to last year's game. A&M won 28-14. I think the line is 9.5. I'll take A&M 28-17.
Okay.
So he prices righted me.
What did you say? What did you say?
27-17.
Okay.
Yeah. $1, Bob. $1. All right. Well, now you have our picks. Let's hear from someone who knows a little bit more about what's going on with the Bulldogs, and we'll be back with him next.